Hi everyone, so it's the start of a new week. So it's actually been quite a few days since we last vlogged because we had a little bit of time off last week spending it with family and things. So got up to doing some nice stuff in Edinburgh, going out and about and things like that. So we've had quite a nice chilled week off. Even though we had our week off though, we're still sending out a few things and sending out a few items and doing little bits to kind of keep things going with our business. So first of all, I thought I'd just update you on what we got up to last week with our new business. Also, if you're new here, my name is Gemma and me and my fiance James run a reselling business where we resell luxury and vintage items online, and we've kind of been doing that for less than a year, so we're really new to the whole reselling thing. So yeah, so last week we actually made quite a few sales. I'm pretty sure in the video previously we sold our vintage Gucci tote bag, so I'll just kind of put a picture up of that here. So got all that sent off, got to use our new packaging and everything, so our new boxes, so that was fab. And then we also sold another vintage bag, which was like a I also find it really difficult to kind of describe the material it's made of. It's kind of like a sort of tapestry, almost like carpet material with a leather handle handbag. So another vintage handbag, which I'll just show you here. And got that sent off and everything as well. And then we eventually managed to sell our Carhartt workwear jacket. So we've had a hold of that for quite a while. Another vintage piece, black Carhartt jacket. Really nice pieces, like really nice and thick, so we're really keen to get that sold, especially for coming into the winter season, so that whoever bought it would actually get use out of it for the autumn winter. So yeah, managed to get that sold as well. So I think I mentioned previously that we've been doing things to kind of try and increase our sales on our online platforms. So the pieces that we managed to sell, those are some of the things that we did actually relist. So I think I mentioned before that we have been looking at relisting things, tweaking the prices a little bit. I mentioned that in our last video that we're really wanting to have a look at our prices to make sure that they were realistic but also enough to make a decent enough profit. So yeah, so the items that we have sold are actually items that we've relisted, maybe tweaked the photos a little bit, but also had a little look at the price. So that is actually kind of currently what we're working on just now. It's kind of working our way through our store and, just looking at things, relisting things, and just sort of doing little changes like that, just so that they, have got a better chance of selling. Yeah, so that's probably going to be the main thing that we're going to be working on this week, is relisting things, trying to get things sold, especially for coming into real sort of key Christmas shopping time. So right now as I'm filming this, it's actually the last week in November. So one of the things I want to talk a little bit is about being quite strategic about when you list things. So for example, when I've been listing things in the middle of the month, like the middle of November, I've been deliberately going for more lower price items because in my mind, people maybe haven't been paid, they're maybe waiting until they get paid before they'll even think about making like a bigger purchase. So I have been sort of listing lower ticket items like that tapestry bag. I think that was only listed for about, I think it was £20, I think it was. So not too pricey. And then so what I'm going to do is this weekend, as it's going to be payday weekend, I'm going to deliberately list things that are a little bit higher ticket. So more expensive handbags, more expensive clothing items, things like that, so that, people have just been paid, so they're probably more likely going to be happy to spend a little bit more. And as I mentioned before, it's the end of November, so for a lot of people, this will be their last payday before Christmas. So I'm also going to focus on listing things. Oh my gosh, there's a wire hanging. I don't know if you could see that yet. Hanging from our window. It's a thing with living in an older property. So there's wires everywhere from all the aerials. So yeah, so that's one of the things that I thought we could do as well, is think about what things might make good gifts and deliberately list those things. So things like purses, maybe slightly smaller items as well, that would make, handbags, that would make really good gifts for people. So yeah, so those are the kind of things that I'm going to be looking at to list this weekend. Being quite strategic about what you're listing and what time of the month that is also a really good thing to consider when you're trying to increase your sales as well. So yeah, so apart from doing a lot of relisting this week and sort of making sure as well that we do it at the weekend, as I said, it's Wednesday today. So I'll be aiming to do a lot of the relisting kind of over the weekend, because that's when people are more likely to be looking online to shop and are going to be on their phones more and things. So yeah, so apart from focusing a lot on that, obviously if we do make any more sales this week, we'll kind of share, you know, what we've sold and things. And also today we are heading away out to the cinema. So we're actually going to go to a new cinema here in Edinburgh, well, a new one for us. It's one of the Odeon ones, but it's an Odeon luxury one. I can't quite remember the name of it. But so that will be the new kind of cinema that we're actually trying out that we've never been to before. So we'll probably take you along there as well. Hi everyone, so it's a couple of days later since we last caught up with you. I'm actually just sitting in the car waiting on James to come out from an appointment, so I just thought I'd check in with what we've been up to this week. So it's actually been really quiet this week, which I'm a little bit surprised about because obviously it's coming up to like the festive period, Christmas shopping and things like that, but I know today, because today's Friday, so this weekend is payday. So my plan is this weekend over the next few days is to relist as many items as possible, just so that you know, the items are fresh. Oh, there's a siren going past, an ambulance. So there's a lot of fresh items and things for people to look at, and then hopefully that will kind of improve our sales. Also, please excuse my bloodshot eye. I've just kind of rubbed it. I wear contact lenses and sometimes it kind of, they give me a little bit of bother, so I've just kind of rubbed it, so that's why it looks a little bit red. So we have actually sold an item either last night or this morning, so we'll get that posted off today as well, so that's good. And then as I said, if I'm relisting things this weekend, I'm going to really try and relist a good few things over Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Hopefully that will help, you know, encourage a few more sales if people have just been paid. Another thing I wanted to mention as well, which is quite exciting for Vinted, is they have started to include the US on their app. So I'm assuming it means that people from the US can now sign up to Vinted and to shop on Vinted. I was seeing little notifications about it on the app, like when I was going on and like on their website and things. And so from what I can see, Vinted take care of a lot of the kind of customs side of things. Obviously, they, you know, people who are in the US will have to pay, I'm assuming, a higher postage cost, but all the sort of confusing things about customs and tariffs and everything like that, it looks like Vinted take care of that, so that is fantastic. And I've actually already noticed that there's been a few things that have been favourited from our shop from people who are in the US. So yeah, it'll be quite exciting to actually get our first kind of couple of US sales and just kind of see how that process works. But I'm assuming it'll be very similar to what it already is, that, you know, you get printed a label, you can print off a label like what you normally can, and then just post it off. And obviously I think the only difference is that the postage costs to the customer will maybe be a bit higher, and obviously it'll take a bit longer to get to your buyer. But yeah, very exciting. So I'm really glad, because that was one of the things that was kind of missing from Vinted, is that they didn't really post to the US. Obviously Depop, eBay and things like that is worldwide, whereas Vinted was all, I'm pretty sure it was UK based previously. I don't even think it went to the EU. I'm not 100% sure on that though, but that, yeah, so just basically bigger market, more customers, and obviously it'll be quite nice for US customers being able to buy vintage things or, you know, items from the UK. So yeah, super excited about that. So this is the vintage piece we've just sold this morning. It's a vintage Jordan t-shirt, so we're just about to package that off and get that sent off just now. Hi again, so it's the next day since we last caught up with you, so I'm just about to actually package up another piece that we just sold, so I'll just show you in a little second of what that is. So it's a vintage Carhartt hoodie. They sold this one on eBay, and I think the other day I mentioned about how Vinted had opened up their app or website, or whatever we want to call it, to the US, so that we could potentially be, you know, getting customers from the US. So we actually noticed that one of our items was favorited by somebody from the US, and we thought we'd sold something, but then it was weird, like it's like they messaged us and made an offer, but then it was like it disappeared. So I don't know if that's the buyer maybe changing their mind, or if there's a little bit of a glitch there. So I'd be keen to hear, if you do sell in Vinted, if you've had any successful sales or, you know, any sort of dealings with people from the US, because it'd be interesting to see how smoothly that's actually running, especially with it being brand new. So this is a Carhartt hoodie that we've just sold. It's a kind of light grey marl on it, and it's actually quite cool. So it's got like a logo that looks like it's from a, what do you call it? Like a work company, and it looks like it's American. So Eldridge, Iowa, and then Amhoff Trucking. So another thing I wanted to mention about this piece is it is actually damaged. It's almost like the person who had it cut into the neck hole to maybe make it a bit bigger or something. And but obviously we did make that very clear in the listing, took pictures of it and everything like that. So obviously, hopefully the seller is obviously expecting to receive this, but obviously it is in the listing. So that's something I just kind of wanted to mention again, was about if you do have things that are damaged, if you are selling, you know, even just second-hand things, or if you're selling, you know, vintage things, that it's totally fine to list things that do have flaws with them, just as long as you're totally open and clear about what's included. So I kind of thought I could talk a little bit about how I actually go about listing items that have imperfections or flaws, just to make sure that your customer is totally clear on what they're receiving and they know what they're buying, there's no nasty surprises. So one of the first things that I sort of make sure that I include is obviously take pictures of all the imperfections. So if there's any marks, if there's any rips or anything like that, make sure and take really close-up photographs of the imperfection, just so that people can clearly see exactly, you know, what it looks like, if it's something that maybe they can fix, how they feel about it, and things like that. So another thing that I try and do is take photos of the imperfection, but maybe a little bit zoomed out, just so that people can see it like in comparison to the rest of the item, so they can see exactly where it lands on the item, if it's on a piece of clothing, if it's on a bag or whatever, and obviously the size of it in comparison to the rest of the bag or whatever, because obviously close up you don't really have any scale to kind of compare it to. So a close up picture, and then maybe a picture a little bit further away, just so that they know what you know, what it's like in comparison to the rest of the item. And then in the description I obviously explain that there is a flaw, whatever it is, and I make sure that it's a separate line of text from the rest of the description, so that it doesn't get lost, just so that, you know, they can't say, oh, I've never seen it, or I didn't read through it properly. Have it separate, so even have all your listing, and then maybe have it, you know, like do a couple of spaces, and then have it like down the bottom, like in a separate line. And I know that's might sound really obvious and really simple, but there's those little things that kind of really stop customer returns and things like that, and any disputes, and obviously getting negative reviews. So you kind of want to make it as easy and clear as possible to your customer, you know, the information about any imperfections. And then usually what I'll say is like, please note, and I'll say there is a scuff mark on and then I'll explain whereabout on the item it is, so that they can look in the pictures again and look for that part of the item, so that they know what they're looking for. And then I'll always say, please see, and then I'll usually make it the last 2 or 1 images, so that it's nice and, you know, easy for them to find the image. And I'll say, you know, please see last image, or please see last 2 images, just so that they can kind of, you know, get an idea of what it looks like, where to find the image of what it looks like, and they're also getting like a text description as well, because sometimes when you're looking at a picture you might think, oh, that doesn't actually look like a rip, it looks like a scuff, or it looks like a mark or something like that, like a stain. So definitely say, you know, what it is, whether it's a rip, whether it's seams that are coming out, whether it's a little scuff, whether it's a little stain, whether it's a button missing, you know, whatever it is. And then I always say in my description as well, you know, please, I say this in every description anyway, is please get in contact if you have any questions or anything. Yeah, so that's kind of what I do to make sure that I'm covering any imperfections and flaws and things like that. If I know as well, if I think, right, okay, I know how to kind of fix this, you know, if somebody else wants to spend the time fixing it, I will kind of mention that, like I'll kind of say, oh, this mark could easily come off with some polish, or it could easily, you know, be stitched back together. To be quite honest with you, if it's stitching, I'll do it, because I know how to sew, and there's no point in, you know, somebody else struggling to do it if they don't know how to do it. So if there's ever been like a seam coming out, or threads or something like that, or you know, a little rip or whatever, I'll usually fix that. And yeah, so it's just, you know, making it, as I said, very clear, very easy for your potential customer, you know, to see what it is, and that there's no, as I said, any nasty surprises. So another thing that I wanted to mention actually, which is kind of a slight negative, but it's also a positive, is we've been so lucky, touch wood, that we have never, up until now, had a package that we've sent go missing. So through selling on Vinted, Depop, eBay, everything, we've never ever had a package that's been on their way to a customer and it's not gotten to them. It's always, everything's managed to get to them. However, I think it was last week, we got an email, it was actually from eBay, saying that our package back through Every, which I'm not surprised at, 'cause I know they've been having issues with, like, I think they've merged with another, is it Impost? Is that correct? No, I don't think it is Every. I can't remember. I know 2 companies have merged and there's been issues. Maybe it's not been them at all. Anyway, but yeah, it was Every. And they'd lost our package and obviously the customer hadn't received it. Now, as I said, this was through eBay. Now, we didn't know that the customer hadn't received it, that there was any issues until it had been resolved. So basically what happened was, we got an email basically saying that the parcel hadn't gotten to our customer, that they've reimbursed our customer with the money that they spent. It's at no cost to us. And it, like, in the email, they really assured us about that. They said, you know, it's at no cost to you. It's not going to come out of your balance or anything like that, or your account. It's not going to negatively affect your store rating or anything like that. Just to let you know, we've resolved it. We've given them their money back, and that's it. It went missing. And obviously that's what you pay. Because I know on eBay you pay like a buyer protection fee similar to Vinted. And I was like, oh my God, I just thought that was so good. That was so dealt with so well. Like, we weren't even aware that it was an issue. eBay just went in, dealt with it, and then let us know when it was all resolved. So I don't know if that's what happens with every case on eBay, or if that's just like a sort of fluke. But definitely really happy with how they dealt with it, especially compared to, I know how Vinted deal with it. Like, I've been on the other end where I've not received an item, and I know that it ends up being quite a headache for the seller, because the seller's the person who gets the message, the seller's the person who gets, asked all the questions, where is it, why isn't it here, can you look into it, when actually it's technically the customer that needs to look into it. It's them that need to contact the delivery company and things like that. There's not really much the seller can do, but a lot of people don't know that. And then from what I've kind of heard before, Vinted doesn't really much help. Like, they won't do anything, I don't think, until, I want to say, is it 21 days or something, that something has to be missing for, before they'll actually look into doing a refund or admit that it's lost and everything. So yeah, very frustrating. I can see why on Vinted, but just have to say, very big positive for eBay. I know I did a video not that long ago about the pros and cons of all the different platforms, so I'll link that below if you haven't watched that, but I would definitely add that as a massive pro for eBay, because it just takes the headache away, and it means that we're not worrying about chasing it up or trying to help the customer, or worrying about getting a negative review and things like that. And as I said, we weren't even aware that it had gone missing, and until it had been resolved, and they gave a refund no problem. And it was within, I want to say it was within a week or something. Like, I think it was maybe a few days after it was meant to have been delivered, and then it was obviously all dealt with. The customer didn't have to wait 21 days. Hi again, so it's a little bit later on, just dropped off that package earlier, and yeah, that's pretty much kind of what we've been up to since the last caught up. I think today I am going to finish editing this vlog, then I think we'll probably relist a few more things. I think I mentioned before that we were spending this weekend relisting a lot of items, just with it being payday weekend and sort of the last kind of maybe big payday weekend for a lot of people before Christmas. So probably spend a little bit of time doing that. And another thing that I wanted to mention as well, I suppose another little question to people who maybe use Vinted, is we've just had a customer ask about an item and asking us to reserve an item. However, when we went to reserve it, our reserve button that used to be on our account has gone missing. So after a little bit of research, it's actually saying that that's something that Vinted is trying out with a few accounts, like taking the reserve button off. So we're going to have to try and find a different way to reserve something. So just in case anybody's having the same problem, they don't have the reserve button anymore. We did this on Depop, where we actually wrote, like, in capital letters on the listing, item is reserved until, and then like a date. So that could be an option that we try. Another thing that I think is probably what we will do is we'll actually hide the item, and we'll kind of keep it hidden until the date that the person says they can purchase it, and then after that date we can just kind of unhide it, and then it'll obviously be visible in our store. So that's just a little tip if you are finding the same thing with your Vinted account, that the reserve button's gone missing. That is a couple of different options that you can kind of do instead. So yeah, so I thought I'll just finish off the vlog here. So if you found it useful or interesting, make sure and subscribe and tick the notification bell so that you're notified for future videos, and I'll see you in our next one. Bye.